Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us today. We've got a special story coming your way, one that's full of bravery, tradition, and incredible moments you won't want to miss. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on tomorrow's amazing story. Every day, we bring you new tales that highlight the courage and discipline of those who serve, and we can't wait to share the next one with you. Let's get started. On the brink of death, a royal guard's heroic action saved his life just in time. James Turner had lived a long life, one marked by both triumph and hardship. At 68, he was a retired U.S. Marine, and even though the years had left their marks on him, his pride and military bearing remained unshaken. He walked with a measured pace, his back straight, his steps steady. As he approached the gates of Buckingham Palace on that chilly autumn morning, the familiar sights and sounds of the area brought him back to memories of his youth, when he'd sworn to protect and serve in ways that seemed worlds apart from the man he had become. His weathered fingers brushed the small medical alert bracelet on his wrist, a constant reminder of the pacemaker that had been implanted after a heart attack 3 years ago. It was a cruel reminder of the toll time and duty had taken on his body. But James refused to let it define him. The pacemaker, though vital, was nothing more than a necessary accessory to his daily life. It didn't stop him from doing the things he loved, like visiting the palace. As he stood there, taking in the grandeur of the palace and the sight of the royal guard stationed nearby, he couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to the young men who stood as he once had. The guard's red tunic was brilliant against the stone backdrop, his posture flawless, a rifle held in perfect formation. It was a symbol of the discipline and tradition James had once been a part of, and he nodded respectfully to the guard as he stood at attention, acknowledging a shared understanding of what it meant to serve. The quiet was only interrupted by the occasional murmur of tourists passing by, pointing at the guards or snapping photos of the impressive sight before them. James smiled to himself. The energy was peaceful, respectful. He knew, deep down, that his visits here would continue as long as his health allowed. The familiarity of it all, the smell of polish and pressed wool, the distant sound of tourists chatting, reminded him of the days when he too had been part of something bigger than himself. For now, standing in his quiet corner by the gates, James felt at peace, content in the knowledge that even though he had aged, the core of who he was, someone who had served, remained unchanged. James Turner had been enjoying the calm of the morning, savoring the familiar peace of the palace grounds. He had stood in this spot many times before, reflecting on the service he once gave and the strength he still carried. But this peaceful moment was about to shatter, and nothing could have prepared him for the disruption that would follow. It started with the sharp sound of glass shattering. A half-empty beer bottle crashed against the palace wall, the noise slicing through the air like a warning. The tourists nearby jumped, their murmurs turning into nervous chatter as the culprit emerged. Ray Dawson, a towering man with a swagger in his step, shouldered his way through the crowd. His leather jacket stretched tight across broad shoulders, and the stench of cheap beer and cigarettes followed him like a storm cloud. James, ever the veteran, eyed him carefully. He had seen men like Ray before, troublemakers who wore their aggression like armor. Ray's eyes darted around the courtyard, scanning for something, or someone, to pick a fight with. When his gaze landed on James, the tension in the air grew thick. Ray sneered, his voice cutting through the crowd with cruel intent. "Move it, Granddad," Ray sneered, shoving an elderly woman out of the way. The crowd instinctively shifted back, creating space around him. James's eyes narrowed, his heart rate quickening, but he stood his ground. He'd been through far worse, and Ray was nothing more than a bully looking for a fight. But then, Ray's eyes locked onto James with a predator's focus. He moved toward the elderly Marine, his words dripping with mockery. "What's wrong with you then, old man?" Ray taunted, his voice thick with a rough accent that spoke of London's toughest streets. "Got something to say?" James met his gaze, his voice calm but firm. "Nothing to say, son. Just enjoying the morning." His response was measured, professional, something that seemed to enrage Ray even more. Ray stepped closer, his breath foul with alcohol. You think you're better than me, don't you? He spat, his hands curling into fists. Look at you, standing there with your medals like they mean something. James felt his pacemaker thrum lightly beneath his chest. His hand instinctively moved toward it, but he didn't show fear. This was nothing compared to the battles he had faced. Yet, deep down, his heart began to race. The tension was mounting, and his pacemaker could only handle so much stress. Ray's mocking laughter filled the air as he took another step toward James, the crowd growing quieter, sensing the storm that was about to break. This wasn't going to end well. The tension in the air thickened as Ray's mocking laughter echoed through the courtyard. James could feel his heart begin to race, the pressure of the situation weighing on him. He had warned Ray, he had told him about his pacemaker, his heart condition. But the man didn't listen. Instead, Ray's actions became more aggressive. You really think your little medals mean anything? Ray sneered, grabbing at one of James's medals. His fingers wrapped around the medal, pulling James closer with a brutal tug. The crowd had fallen silent now, watching as the confrontation escalated. James winced, feeling the pressure against his chest, where the pacemaker sat beneath his jacket. His breathing was becoming shallow, his heartbeat irregular, but he refused to show weakness. This wasn't the first time he'd faced a man like Ray, but it felt different. His chest tightened, the pacemaker struggling to keep up with the adrenaline surging through his body. Step back, James said quietly, his voice steady but strained. He could feel his pacemaker working harder now, fighting against the panic rising in his chest. But Ray wasn't listening. He shoved James again, harder this time. The force sent James stumbling backward, his legs barely keeping him steady. The crowd watched in a mix of horror and confusion, unsure of what was unfolding before them. James's breath hitched as the pain in his chest intensified. He could feel the pacemaker struggling to maintain a steady rhythm, the rapid beats echoing in his ears. This was getting dangerous. He needed to get away, but Ray wasn't done. He stepped forward, leaning in with a cruel grin. I think you're faking it, Ray hissed, his voice low and threatening. Let's see just how real your heart is. Before James could react, Ray shoved him again, this time with full force. James's body hit the stone pavement with a sickening thud, his head striking the ground. The shock of the impact sent a jolt through his system, and he could feel everything go still for a moment. His heart stopped. The pacemaker, overloaded by the stress and physical trauma, struggled to keep him alive. The crowd gasped, but Ray was too consumed by his own twisted satisfaction to care. He shook James violently, his hands gripping the old veteran's shoulders. Wake up! Ray screamed. You're faking it! Stop pretending! But James didn't respond. His body lay still, his face taking on a pale bluish tint as his breathing grew shallow. The pacemaker had failed, overwhelmed by the combination of trauma and stress. Time was running out, and if something didn't happen soon, this would be the end. That's when the U.S. Honor Guard, standing motionless at his post just moments before, sprang into action. In a flash, the guard was there, moving with the precision of a trained warrior. With one swift motion, he gripped Ray's wrist, stopping him mid-shove, just inches from delivering another blow. Step back, the guard commanded, his voice calm but filled with the authority of someone who had seen real battle. Ray froze, his wild eyes meeting the guard's steady gaze. He tried to pull away, but the guard's grip tightened, and with one controlled push, Ray was sent stumbling backward, off balance and knocked to the ground. The guard didn't hesitate. Dropping to one knee, he checked for James's pulse, his gloved hands moving with practiced precision. His training took over as he began chest compressions, each movement deliberate, aimed at keeping James alive. The crowd, stunned into silence, watched as the guard, once a mere figure of ceremony, became a lifeline in a moment of crisis. Seconds turned to minutes as the guard worked, his every action driven by the solemn duty to save a life. The chaos in the courtyard escalated as Ray Dawson struggled to regain his footing. The crowd had gone eerily quiet, murmurs of disbelief spreading like wildfire. But all eyes were on the U.S. Honor Guard, who, without a second thought, had intervened with military precision. The man who had been merely a figure of ceremony moments before was now fighting to save a life, James's life. Ray, still on the ground, scrambled to his feet, his breath heavy and erratic. He's faking it! He screamed, his voice rising in a desperate pitch. His hands trembled as he pointed a shaky finger at the honor guard, but the guard paid him no mind. He was focused, his hands working with expert precision as he continued CPR, his movements methodical and swift. He could feel the faint, irregular pulse beneath James's chest, but it was weak, struggling. Ray's panic deepened, and his voice cracked. "You can't arrest me for this," he shouted, eyes wild with fear. "Like he was just pretending. I barely touched him. What's the big deal?" The honor guard, kneeling beside James, didn't flinch at Ray's outburst. His focus never wavered. He delivered another round of chest compressions, each one punctuated by a quiet count under his breath. The white gloves on his hands were now stained with sweat and the evidence of his urgent efforts, but there was no sign of slowing down. "You need to clear the area," the honor guard commanded, his voice cutting through the crowd. It was no longer the voice of ceremony, but one of authority, an order. And the people, sensing the severity of the situation, instinctively stepped back. Ray's frustration boiled over. He continued shouting, his words slurring with panic. "You're both in on it, trying to make me look bad. He's faking. I didn't do anything wrong." The crowd watched in stunned silence, some of them pulling out their phones to record, others muttering that the man had been warned. But no one moved to stop the honor guard. They knew he was doing everything he could. Each breath the guard took, each steady push of his hands on James's chest, was a lifeline. Then, after what felt like an eternity, there was a faint gasp. James's chest rose slightly, the color slowly returning to his face as his pacemaker, given a moment to reset, kicked back into action. James's eyes fluttered open, his first sight the honor guard's face, stern but concerned. "Thank you, son," James whispered, his voice weak but filled with gratitude. The honor guard nodded, helping James sit up with careful hands, his training evident in every move. Ray, standing at a distance, still yelled accusations, but the moment of panic was over. The honor guard had done what he was trained for, and now, as James slowly regained his strength, the tension in the air began to dissolve. But for Ray, it wasn't over. He was about to face the consequences of his actions. The police sirens, now louder in the distance, marked the end of the confrontation. Ray's frantic protests grew more desperate. He'd tried to break a man. Now he would face the truth of his actions. The honor guard, standing tall once again, was unwavering in his stance, ready to protect and serve, no matter the cost. The tension was far from over. As the paramedics arrived, their sirens cutting through the stillness, the crowd began to stir, but Ray was still in denial, his eyes wild, his mind racing. He looked at the U.S. Honor Guard, who had returned to his post, standing tall with unwavering discipline. The Honor Guard's stance was once again ceremonial, but there was a new weight to it now. He had acted, and he had saved a life. Ray, however, still couldn't grasp what had just happened. His voice cracked as he pointed toward the Honor Guard. "He's fine. It was all just an act. You can't arrest me. I barely touched him." He was grasping for any excuse, any way to shift the blame, but the reality of the situation was sinking in. He'd gone too far. James, though weak, had regained his strength, helped to his feet by the paramedics. His breathing was steady now, the color slowly returning to his face as the pacemaker did its job. But it was the moment between him and the Honor Guard that stuck with everyone. As James straightened his jacket and nodded his thanks to the young man who had saved him, the silent understanding between them spoke volumes. James had been through war, through battles far worse than this, but this was different. It wasn't a fight for survival in combat. It was a fight for life in the heart of a peaceful, historic moment. The Honor Guard, once just a figure standing at attention, had shown what true strength meant. He had shown what real power looked like, not in the physical strength to overpower an opponent, but in the moral courage to protect and serve. The Honor Guard had stepped beyond his ceremonial duty. He had become a protector in a moment of crisis, willing to put everything on the line to save a life. Meanwhile, Ray's protests grew weaker as the police officers approached, ready to take him into custody. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything stepped forward, confirming James's warnings about his condition. They had seen it all: Ray's aggression, his disregard for James's health, and his complete lack of remorse. As the police placed Ray in handcuffs, the crowd slowly began to disperse, their whispers fading into the background. James, now standing tall, took one last look at the Honor Guard. Their brief exchange, a nod, a shared understanding, was all that needed to be said. The incident was over, but the lesson remained. True strength was not in bullying the vulnerable. It was in standing up for what was right, even when it meant breaking from protocol. The honor guard's posture shifted, returning to his ceremonial duties. But it was clear to everyone watching that beneath the uniform lay a warrior, one who had proven that duty went far beyond just standing still. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this incredible story. What do you think about the actions of the U.S. Honor Guard? Do you believe breaking protocol to save a life is the true essence of duty? Or do you think there are moments when following the rules is more important, no matter the situation? This story shows us that strength is not just about physical power, but about the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's difficult. The Honor Guard went beyond what was expected, risking everything to protect a fellow veteran, and that's something we can all learn from. We also want to know what you think about Ray's actions. Do you believe people like him deserve second chances, or is there no excuse for his behavior? Let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on what real strength and courage mean to you. We love reading your comments and engaging with you. So drop a comment below to let us know what you think. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new video. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another incredible story that will inspire you to think about bravery, honor, and doing the right thing. Stay tuned.